Hey folks, welcome back to the show. We are a couple of weeks into the new year, and if you're anything like me, I'm ready for a bit of a reset in my routines. And this episode is going to talk about just that. We're talking about this very popular topic that is becoming more and more popular as time goes on. We're talking about fasting. And we are talking about a very particular type of fast and the benefits. As a matter of fact, you even get to learn about how this type of fast done in a particular way on average has helped people to reverse their biological age by 2.5 years after just 3 months. So action-packed episode. You don't want to miss this. Of course, I want to thank you guys for being here, and I'd love to encourage you to visit natnidham.com because that's the website. That's where you can sign up for the newsletter. That's where you can also sign up for our peptide-specific newsletter, where you learn about our membership community, and also where you can find all kinds of information about the podcast and about me and about all the different things that we do. All right, let's talk about today's show. We are uncovering the secrets to reversing metabolic mayhem with 92% of us. Can you believe that? 92% of us being metabolically unhealthy. Yeah, you heard that right. Renee Fitton from Prolon Life joins us to explain what that actually means and why a little fasting magic might just save the day. This is all about less is more, folks. You won't get a guilt trip from us about your holiday feasting. After all, we're designed to feast, fast, and thrive. Now, stay with us for a very practical way for you to improve metabolic health and achieve a biological age reset without the challenges of water-only fasting. Now, you can find out more about Renee Fitton and the amazing FMD kit or Fast Mimicking Diet kit at prolonlife.com/nat. And that's where we've even got this beautiful 20% discount for listeners of this podcast. And you could try this on your own, or you could even plan to join me at the beginning of March for an upcoming group FMD fast that we'll be talking about on social media. So you'll hear all about it. Definitely sign up for the newsletter because we'll be talking about it there. And also the 20%. So when you use prolonlife.com/nat, 20% is automatically applied at checkout. And if you're in Canada, just go to prolonfast.ca and make sure to use code NAT20 at the checkout in order to save 20% off your kit. Hey folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider. Welcome, 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 Renee Fitton, to the show. It is such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to sink our teeth into these topics today. I think we've got a lot of fun stuff to cover.
Yes, me too. And especially at the time of year that it is. Like, we're recording this literally hot on the heels of the festive season. Tomorrow night is New Year's Eve. I've referred to this season as the marathon Christmas because we had extended family that couldn't get to us until the Friday after Christmas. And so there's been sweets and treats and stuff in my house for, it seems like forever. And
absolutely. I mean, I feel like it started at the beginning of just like realistically Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
And for us Canadians, Thanksgiving starts in October. So, I mean, we just never get a break.
Yeah. Well, no, it's funny. I find with Canadian Thanksgiving, it just seems a bit more reasonable than U.S. Thanksgiving. Yeah. I don't know why. Maybe it's because U.S. Thanksgiving comes with Black Friday and there's that whole excess thing going on and you're just going and going. But definitely, you know, by the time Christmas rolls around and you've got the cocktails and the parties and the this and the that, I know for me, it's a lot of people are like, yeah, you know, they stop their routines. And I'm like, no, I double down on my routines at that point because otherwise it's Armageddon.
Well, good for you, because I'm sure that a lot of people are a lot more like me and some of those routines start to go by the wayside. So I think that's why January 1st is such a big deal for so many people, because it's finally this time where you've been able to kind of separate from all of the holiday madness and just refocus on your routine. or
Yeah.
building new routines.
No, 100%. It's a beautiful time to reset. And even though a lot of people think of it as a cliche,
Yeah.
bring it on.
Right.
Bring the cliche. It's there for a reason. Like, take time to assess and reassess and refocus. And anyway, so we're going to talk about a lot of that today. But I think that a good place to start is because you work with. Well, let's first talk about your background, right? I mean, so you're a dietitian, and the dietitian industry is to me is very interesting because I feel like there's different streams of people in your field. So let's talk a little bit about why you are where you are doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I like to call myself a longevity dietitian. So
Nice.
there's,
You're in the right place.
Yes, exactly. And I actually can say that because I got my master's degree in health span and longevity nutrition. So
Nice.
it is a very specific type of nutrition. As you mentioned, there's all sorts of dietitians out there. There's a lot of dietitians that focus specifically on specific health conditions. My focus is on how can we live the longest, but not just live the longest, live our healthiest long.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that concept of health span, right? That we're trying to feel like we're in our 20s all the way through to 110. So
yes. I actually just finished speaking to a group of people who have zero intention of ever dying, which is a little bit, and it's funny because the woman who read my bio said, and Nathalie's going to help us live well into our 50s and 60s, and forgot the and beyond part. I was like, holy jumping. Wait, no. You're cutting it off way too short here.
Oh, no. I mean, obviously in my line of work, all I hear are people who are saying, I'm aiming for 150. I'm aiming for 175 and, completely straight face. Like it is a reality for a lot of people right now in the way that we have just completely changed the way we biohack, the way that we work with our nutrition, with our lifestyle, all the things that we're changing. And also just like the motivation and positivity that we're putting around living healthier longer. So I'm here for it.
Yeah, no, me too. I mean, I think I think the mindset that's really kicked in has come with this realization that the human body has the ability to regenerate and fix itself on the fly. Right?
Yes.
And for whatever reason, as we age, some of those systems start to malfunction, they start to go down. And so what is it that we can do to help to regenerate, to reignite and help the body in doing these things performing these functions that it's done for us all the way along? So, I mean, obviously it goes without saying that we're living in an environment that is far more stressful to our system and to ourselves than ever before. Sorry. But if we can kind of mitigate that stuff and then at the same time take actions that help the body to renew, we're going to help to move the needle. And we're seeing it. We're seeing people living longer, healthier.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, we've got this dichotomy
Yes.
of a stat we talked about before, which I'm going to put it out there and then I'm going to let you rip away, go at it, and that is this crazy stat that recently was published that said that 92% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. So first of all, what the heck does that mean?
Yes.
And secondly, because, 92% of people walking around are not sick, but what does that mean that they're metabolically unhealthy? And what the hell happened?
Right. Well, okay, let's first talk about what the heck that means. So metabolically unhealthy is actually kind of a umbrella term for a handful of things that might be going wrong in your metabolic system. So that could include things like high blood pressure. It could include high blood sugar or insulin resistance, so the inability to properly manage blood sugar. It can also just be obesity or a high weight for your health. So there's a bunch of things that can tie into this metabolically unhealthy kind of umbrella term, which is also probably why 93% of Americans 93 are metabolically unhealthy.
Yeah. So it's one or more of those factors. And like you said, like it could even be like people's body composition is off. Like they're carrying that extra tire around their waist or around their middle, which we know is ultimately like, it's this crazy catch-22, because if you're not sleeping well, if you're insulin resistant, you're craving more carbs, you build up that little tire, it secretes more inflammatory cytokines, and it just kind of spirals from there, which sounds super scary and crazy, but it's not. Like, the good news,
Yeah.
I think, is that being metabolically unhealthy is probably the best diagnosis you can get. Why? Because it's completely reversible.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right? And that's what's nutty, right? You actually have the power to rewind and reverse and go back. And that, to me, is really, really inspiring.
Absolutely. And that's why I love what we do, is to help people really latch onto that and just skyrocket their health, because it's pretty phenomenal what lifestyle change can do. And also the arsenal of lifestyle changes that we can leverage to support metabolic health. I certainly have some of my favorites and ones that I think do the biggest bang for your buck. What can you do with the least amount of energy and get a lot of return, both for longevity, metabolic health, etc. But there's tons. There's so much that you can do. Lifestyle is another umbrella term that just it has a lot of things that we can take advantage of.
So what are the big hitters for you? What in terms of lifestyle, like, what are the things that you think? And because this is a perfect time of year to be talking about this, right? It's January. Right. So if you were going to give someone that you never met, what are your heavy hitters?
So I think I'm going to finish with the one that I want to spend the most time on. Yes. So I'm just lightly going to touch on one that I think is really critical, that I think is underrated and not talked about enough, which is sleep, and the right amount of sleep at the right time, and just living also in line with your circadian rhythm. So that actually has a whole other, we could talk about that for days. But the other one that I want to touch on, and this is the one that I think I would recommend to almost every single person, and we can talk about the people that it might not be a perfect fit for too, but to almost every person, is fasting. And so there's tons of different ways you can fast. There's lots of different timing, but my personal favorite is prolonged fasting. So that's fasting for over about 2 to 3 days, and ideally up to about 5 days, and only doing that maybe 3 to 4 times a year.
Right. Amazing. I love that. But we're gonna back up a little bit, because that is our ultimate destination, folks, and we're gonna really lean into what that is. But I think that and I think that the sleep one is so powerful, because from sleep comes better ability to regulate your own behavior the next day, having better energy so that you can actually move your body, making better food choices. Like, all of those things can fall out of good quality sleep. Right? And so,
and repair. I mean, you were just talking about that rejuvenation and that repair. I mean, that is the time that our body is doing the absolute most repair. So, we're not always going to be perfect. We might not always make the best choices in, the lifestyle change that we want to make. But that period of sleep is one of those incredible opportunities where our body is going to, say, don't worry, we got this. We're going to do a little bit of work for you and clean things up a little bit.
Yeah. Clean up on aisle 7. We got you. Okay. So let's go back a bit to this whole metabolic crisis that we seem to be in. And let's talk about why. Like, so obviously people don't sleep enough, or they sleep at the wrong times. Screens is a massive piece of the puzzle, but I think that the elephant in the room, and the most obvious answer to that question, is food.
Yes.
And when we eat, what we're eating, how often we're eating, like, all of those things come into play. So maybe we want to touch on on all of those to help people, maybe to see, is there one of these that really hits home for you? You're like, oh yeah, wait, no, that's me. I'm getting caught with that.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the problem, is that there are so many ways that we can get caught in, metabolically unhealthy food choices. I think specifically nutrition is probably, without a doubt, the closest tie to metabolically unhealthy choices. So when we make choices that are high sodium. Those are generally going to raise your blood pressure, and that's one of those metabolically unhealthy markers. Another one is your blood sugar, which inevitably is tied to refined sugars, refined carbohydrates. So, already we've got 2 or 3 things that we're now needing to be mindful of. Then, of course, there's your heart health. And now we're talking about high levels of excess saturated fats and trans fats. And so, holy smokes, now I've already said 5 things. And unfortunately, in today's food system, we are bombarded with foods that are high in some cases, all of them.
And that's the problem, right?
One convenient box that probably tastes incredible. And so, we are, of course, metabolically unhealthy. Like, of course we are, because that's what our shelves are filled with. And that's what tastes good. So it's the unfortunate reality of our food system. And we really have to be so mindful all of the time of all the food choices that we're making. And that's exhausting for a lot of people. So, I mean, that's, to me, it's, of course, we are metabolically unhealthy. Of course, 93% of us are metabolically unhealthy. We've been set up for failure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you touched on the hyperpalatability of food, which is, I think, a massive issue. And it's the biggest reason why I think whether you're working with, whether you're talking to a nutritionist like me or a dietitian like you, getting people away from processed foods, things that are come in boxes and bags that have not been designed properly, that have been designed to drive the bottom line, is ultimately a recipe for trouble, because they are made to be consumed in excess. And right. And it's interesting that you brought up the saturated fat and the sodium. I think that there's more nuance in there. I mean, some people do better with saturated fat. Some people are less sensitive to sodium than others. But ultimately, if you eat a high saturated fat, high carb, high sodium, high processed food diet, you're going down. I don't care who you are.
Right. And I'm
maybe Michael Phelps can get away with it, but we're not even sure.
Well, and like we said, it's also just like, it may be one thing, but now we're going to just pile them on top of each other. And just like, there's going to be a point where there's a tipping point, there's a breaking point. And our bodies are pretty incredible at self-repair and rejuvenation, but there's a point where even our bodies just say, hey, you've beat me to a pulp and I'm done helping you out. And I can't, I need you to give me a break so that I can come back and help you. So let's talk a bit.
Let's talk a bit about the timing of meal timing, because I think that feeds into like a really interesting theme that we're going to see a lot more of this year. You were talking about it earlier, is this whole respecting the body's circadian rhythm, and the idea that different every organ and cell in the body has its own circadian cycle. But as soon as you mess up the big one, everything else falls out of whack behind it, because nothing can go right.
Exactly.
And talking about how does meal timing kind of feed into this whole idea of a circadian cycle?
So I love circadian cycles. I think it's such an interesting topic, and we probably could talk about this for an hour. But essentially the concept is that our bodies have our cells, every cell has that clock, and that it is really designed to tell you to eat at a certain time and stop eating at a certain time. And our cells do better when we follow that clock and follow that schedule. So the schedule is relatively simple, and it's, funny enough, in line with the when the sun goes up and the sun goes down. It's actually really interesting that if you put a person in a closed, dark box and they don't know when the sun is going up and the sun is setting, your body will still have a sense as to when that is happening and know kind of when you want to eat in line with that circadian pattern, because it is programmed in our cells. It is programmed in our body, regardless of whether or not we can see it. Now, seeing the sun and aligning yourself even closer with that will get you closer to that circadian rhythm, which is why you've probably, I'm sure you've talked about this, go look at the sun, go see the sun when you start your day. It will allow you to be more in line with your circadian rhythm. But another thing you can do is start eating at when you're it's usually in the first few hours of your day, and also stopping at least 3 hours before bed. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
that's kind of that perfect timeline. Ideally, that should be about 12 hours maximum of eating, but you can also shorten that. So there's a little bit of conflict, although lately a lot of the research is pointing to about 8 hours, anywhere between 8 to 10 hours, especially for people who are looking to lose weight or who need to lose weight or who are metabolically unhealthy. And then going up to that 12-hour mark for those who are generally healthy and are already, quite in line with both their nutrition, their weight, and also their circadian rhythms.
Yeah. And I think folks, this is a really interesting exercise because a lot of people might be listening to this and going, yeah, whatever. Yeah, sure. No problem. But write it down. Write down when the last bite of food crosses your lips before you go to bed. And that includes the cookie that you swiped off the counter at 11 o'clock as you were going to bed. And here's the thing, at this time of year, I think we almost need a purge, like to start the new year, because I know that I've had no fewer than 2 panettones delivered to my house in the last 5 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
2 baskets of sweets. And that's on top of everything else that people have brought over. Right. And I feel like I need to have a purge. I'm like, everything needs to leave this house or we're just going to keep chowing down on it. But anyway, going back to my first point, write it down. Write down when you had your last bite of the day and when you now are going to have your next bite the next day. Because I think that we can be very surprised that not eating window is much less than 12 hours.
Absolutely. And I would say also, don't just do it on a weekday, do it on a weekend too, because the variability in the times at which we're eating changes throughout the week, depending on what's going on, your schedule, the weekends versus weekdays. So I would even say handpick like 3 or 4 days and then see what it looks like. And you'll notice, I mean, the researchers at the Salk Institute, where a lot of the circadian research is being done right now, did that exact study. And they asked people to just take pictures of their food. Maybe just do that. Take pictures of your food. It has a timestamp on it, right? And that's what they did. They sent it in and people were eating around the clock and they didn't even recognize that they were eating.
You don't realize it.
Yeah, because it's so easy to mindlessly eat when we have, we're so close to our kitchens, and a lot of us are, at home even more than ever now that working from home is becoming more and more prevalent. So, it's pretty shocking when you see how much around the clock we're eating. It's a lot more than 12 hours. That's for sure.
Okay. 100%. And so then it's a good idea. So what are your thoughts on intermittent fasting? And I know there's different schools of thought here, and some of them are driven more maybe by convenience. But if you really think about what's best for the human body, would we eat when we first wake up in the morning and then maybe stop eating earlier? I mean, certainly where I am right now, you can probably see behind me, it's not even 5 o'clock and it's already getting dark. Right. So if I'm eating with the sun, I will have had my dinner by now, which if I was hanging out with my conference buddy, Katrine, who I go to conferences with, she has us out for dinner at 4:30 at the latest.
No way.
We beat the Blue Rinse crowd.
That's incredible. That is incredible. And my answer would be in line with Katrine that yes, it is ideal for us to be shifting that eating window earlier. Now, that being said, I also would, I think a lot of people, as you mentioned, find it far more convenient to shift it. Yeah. So it's not to say that it is going to be not valuable to have that intermittent fasting window and shift it where you're eating later in the evening. But if I had to pick which one was better and more in line with our circadian rhythms, then I would certainly say shifting it earlier, having a breakfast, getting food when your cortisol levels rise in the morning. That is a natural thing that there's nothing we can really do about it. That's just what happens. And so having food then is going to be beneficial as well. And then not eating at least 3 hours before bed. It also lets your body, it helps with digestion. It helps with better sleep, but it also helps with our metabolic health because we don't want to be boosting our blood sugar. Our body is actually not as able to get that blood sugar down later in the evening. So it is better to just shift it a little bit earlier if you can. And I would even urge people to try, like, even if it's 30 minutes earlier, just do something.
Go baby steps.
Yeah.
Go with baby steps. Well, wasn't there a study that was done, and I think it was with women, where they gave women, what was it? They gave them the exact same meals, but one group of women ate later in the evening and the other group ate earlier in the evening. And the women that ate later in the evening gained weight, whereas eating the exact same food, like people who ate after dark. And I don't even think it was that late, like maybe 8 or 9 o'clock or something.
Right.
And now, which is an interesting concept, right? Because if you go to a culture like in Spain, where they eat late, certainly they don't have the rates of obesity that we have in North America, but I think certainly the whole traditional way of life is very different than ours is. So
they're doing a lot of other lifestyle changes or lifestyle implementation that are really good for them as well. And I want to be careful not to strictly associate it with the sun, because as you mentioned, there's times where it gets darker really early. And so are we supposed to stop eating or start, our dinner at 4 p.m.? For a lot of us, that's just not feasible, right?
Yeah.
Because our body, it has its own clock. So it's not 100% following the sun. And you can have dinner around like 6, 7, or even 8. And that could be fine, especially if your bedtime is generally around that like 10, 11 o'clock period. That 3-hour period before bed is also kind of a good judge.
Yeah, I would agree. I think 8 o'clock is getting late, but if you can be done eating by 7, then you're pretty much 7:30, you're pretty much in the clear, in my mind, certainly. Yep. And it's the kind of thing that people have to play around with, right? So, okay. So we've talked a little bit about timing of food. We've talked about the hyperpalatability of food. We've talked about some of the lifestyle interventions. Now let's talk a little bit about, we've talked a little bit about intermittent fasting ultimately, right? Which is shifting your eating window, maybe shrinking it down, maybe eating only 8 hours a day, maybe 6 hours a day. Some people get away with 4 hours a day or this one meal a day. I don't want to go too deep into that because we're getting into different layers of complexity that will take us down many, many other rabbit holes. But let's talk a little bit about this whole, and actually what I do think I want to talk about is, this fasting has really, really taken off over the last number of years. I mean, there was a time when you talked about fasting and people would run from the hills. They'd be like, you are crazy. This is not normal. This is not right. This is, when actually it's quite normal. It's very right. From an evolutionary perspective, we would not be here if our ancestors hadn't had the ability not only to fast, but to function really well, because they had to be able to go out and hunt while they were fasted. So, right? And that's that metabolic flexibility thing that we seem to have kind of lost touch with.
Well, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that's something that I always like to point back to people, because they always think it's a fad or it's a trend or it's, new. Absolutely not. It's the oldest eating tradition. It's in all the major religions. Our bodies evolved to thrive during a fast, because in our early days, we didn't have refrigerators. We didn't have everything at our beck and call. We had to go hunt it down and find it. And there were long periods of time where food wasn't present. And so our bodies actually had to evolve to take advantage of those periods and thrive during those periods of fasting. And so our body naturally actually has evolved to do really, really well, especially during long fasts.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And it's funny because the other big, and so there's all these fears, right? Fears around fasting. You're going to lose your muscle, right? Which is not entirely unfounded. But let us go back to our ancestors a little bit and think about what would have happened if their muscles had melted every time they had more than a 24-hour fast.
Well, and our body is super intelligent. Our body is so incredibly intelligent. It has learned so much over the millions and millions of years. And it turns out that when we go into a fasted state, especially for longer periods of time, there's some counter regulatory hormones that will say, hey, whoa, we need to watch out. We don't have food right now, so we should probably be protecting our muscle. We want to make sure we don't go here too much. And so things like growth hormone actually increase when we're in a fast. And so there's a lot of things that our body is doing to protect our muscles during a fast. Now, there's things that I would recommend to especially protect muscle during a fast, which we can talk about. But
yeah, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So
Bring it.
my favorite way to fast is actually through fasting mimicking, where we allow our body we're essentially tricking our body into thinking it is fasting, but we are sneaking in some nutrients and some nutrition to help support muscle, to help make it safer, and obviously to make it a little bit easier because we get to eat some food throughout the period of our fast.
Yeah, no, I'm all in for that, because I do think that I've done a lot of different, because of what I do, of course, I have to try everything. And I've done up to a 5-day water fast. And I will say that, unlike some people for whom after 2 to 3 days, the sky, the clouds part, the sun comes out, the angels sing, they're like, their energy is off the charts and they're clear headed and everything is great. I'm miserable. And part of it is that I think that I'm not as metabolically flexible as I could be. So my body fights ketosis like nobody's business. As a matter of fact, at A4M, I did this thing where they had some supplement that was supposed to push you into ketosis. And so we did a finger prick. And then I was supposed to drink this drink and then come back like an hour later or something. And so I did. And my ketones were lower after the drink than they were before. And the woman was like, can I poke another finger to see what was going on?
She is not a representation of our product.
She's like, you can leave now. We're not giving you any product. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. So, which speaks to bio-individuality, right? Like different people respond differently to the same intervention. But I want to go into this idea of providing minimal energy calories to the body, but at the same time, nutrition to the body. And this goes to the work of Dr. Valter Longo, which when I first got my hands on his book, I was like jaw on the floor going, oh my God, this is crazy. Like the results that he got from his research were truly incredible. There it is.
Literally
longevity diet
all times.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk about his work a little bit, because that is ultimately, Prolon is an offshoot of it's about bringing the FMD to the world, right? Because at the very beginning, I was building my menus. I was sitting there painstakingly calculating calories and trying to, oh, wait, no, not that many leaves of lettuce, that many, oh, no, one too many pieces of pepper.
No, I mean, I like to remind people, like, it would be really tough. You might get all the pieces to build a Tesla, but good luck actually putting that together. That's the same concept of fasting mimicking. It's really tough because it's more than calories. It's actually the specific nutrients. So let's maybe talk about how the heck you can fast with food. What is the science here? Because as you mentioned, it's based off of Dr. Valter Longo's work, but there are decades of research on fasting mimicking. There's now over 40 clinical studies on fasting mimicking and all of the incredible impacts that it can have across condition types, healthy individuals, what have you. So there's a lot of information here, and there's a lot of science that backs this up. So I'm not just making this up. I mean, sometimes it does sound too good to be true, but the science is there, the research is there. So let's unpack that a little bit. So essentially, we wanted to figure out what our cells actually perceive as a fast. And it turns out our cells don't read the same dictionary that we do. It's not, is there food going into your mouth or is there not food going into your mouth? It's actually these essentially alarm bells on the cell's surface that look for very specific nutrients and in specific amounts. And so essentially, if you can live below the threshold of those alarm bells, by choosing the right type of nutrients and only having them in the very specific amount that doesn't trigger them, your body will actually still behave and respond like it is in a fast, but you're enjoying some food, it's still moderate levels, but it is living below that threshold. So it's pretty incredible. Your body is activating all the wonderful things that we want from fasting, but you get to still eat food.
And the other benefit of and I remember, who was it? I think it was Dr. Dan Pompa, who years ago said that he felt that by having a little bit of food during a fast, it really helped to support the body's detoxification processes, so that people suffer. Like, one of the things that people, I mean, look, let's face it, when people do a water fast, there's a whole lot of pain and suffering going on for many people. Not everybody. Some people have quite an easy time with it, but definitely when you get it later into it. And part of it is being driven by, if your blood sugar is not stable and your body's not able to flip over to fat burning, you get left high and dry and your brain's pretty sure you're going to die. So it's going to do whatever it takes
Right.
to stop this nonsense. But the other thing that's happening is one of the things that the body does is it sequesters toxins in adipose tissue and fat. And by having the right foods and a lot of fluids, you can help the body to process those toxins and get rid of them, so that you don't end up with like a Herx reaction, right?
Yes.
So maybe would you like to talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's a really interesting, it's a real nod to being able to consume those right foods at that sub-threshold level, so that the body, cellularly, you're still experiencing the benefits of fasting, but physiologically, you're not kind of suffering in the same way.
Well, I think I would like to answer that by saying that the fasting mimicking diet is actually allowed to be studied in a very large population group. So there's people that have been studied with IBD. There's MS models now. There's, of course, type 2 diabetes. And that research is pretty darn easy to do and get through the IRB boards. And so the people that are essentially saying, this is a safe study, you can do this.
Right.
Whereas with the water only fasting, to try and convince an IRB to allow a 5-day water only fast, they're going to push back so hard. It's almost impossible to get those studies done because of the safety concerns. Whereas when you do it with food, all of a sudden, a lot of those fears and concerns go away. It has been shown in dozens of studies to be safe with very limited side effects. And by side effects, I mean, the stuff that you're seeing are like a light headache or, things like that. I mean, people have that when they eat a bag of Cheetos. So,
We'll stop drinking coffee or whatever.
Right, right, exactly. So it is just incredibly safe. And it actually takes away a lot of the concerns from water only fasting. So I would say that's one piece of the puzzle, but also I like to leverage this in patients where we are concerned about, low blood pressure, low blood sugar. We now have a type 2 diabetes specific fasting mimicking protocol and program for individuals that may have a little bit more risk. So we want to be careful, but having food with your fast takes off a lot of the fear.
So how is the type 2 diabetes protocol different? Are you providing them with different nutrients, or how is it modified?
Great question. So the program, so most importantly, it's a program. So we add in dietitians, medical providers, lifestyle medicine providers to adjust medications, to run labs. So it's a lot more involved and supportive, which I think is probably the most important piece.
For sure.
The other piece is, yes, it is a slightly adjusted fasting mimicking diet that is a little bit lower in carbohydrates and higher in fat to support individuals that might have a little bit of difficulty with blood sugar management and regulation, certainly which would be the case in individuals with type 2 diabetes and prediabetes, which are the vast majority of the people doing those programs.
It's so many people right now. I mean, it's really...
It is an epidemic. So
it's more, I think it's more often the case than not. So, so you mentioned earlier, and I don't know if it was during the podcast or before, but you mentioned that there's aspects of the fast mimicking diet that are muscle sparing, that protect muscle. And do you want
Yes.
to maybe talk about that a little bit? And because I think that that's a really interesting thing, because that's the biggest freak out that people have. Well,
Yes.
there's the first freak out, which is, what do you mean I don't get to eat? And then the second freak out is, but all my muscle's going to melt and I'm going to die. So,
Yep. And I certainly think, and understandably, well, one, just because it seems to make sense, but also because there's a lot of people out there that are suggesting that that is the case, even though the literature and the research doesn't really seem to support that. But certainly with fasting mimicking, every single trial that we have shows muscle protection and muscle sparing. And the reason is multifold. One, we have that increase in growth hormone that just happens naturally when we fast, which is very protective to muscle. But now we also add in some small amounts of protein and carbohydrates and even, and calories that allow our body to, instead of going, hey, let's go check out that protein in the muscle, let's go take it from there. It's coming naturally from your food. So it allows your body to say, let's just focus on the food sources of protein as opposed to going to tap into
it's easier. Sure.
So that is certainly a lot easier for the body to go that way. Now, we also have something called the glycerol beverage that is called the L drink on the bottle. And that is also muscle sparing, because when we are in a fast, and interestingly, only when we are in a fast, our body will use glycerol and turn it into sugar. And it usually won't do that because it's a lot of work to turn that into sugar, and it's just like not worth the hassle for the body to do that. But when we are in a fasted state, it is worth the hassle, and it is worth the trouble to go through that whole process and turn it into glucose. So that allows the body to have, again, another source of energy when it is low, to avoid tapping into our muscle stores of protein.
Interesting. That's interesting about the glycerol drink. So, but I guess it's just enough to meet the metabolic needs of the body in the moment.
Yes.
So
And
there's
also,
not enough there to be stored. It's just enough for the body to go, oh, gift, need that.
Exactly. Nailed it. And again, it's all about that threshold, right? So like you can have some, you just don't want to surpass that threshold.
Right.
And that's that perfect balance. And that's where all the 30 years of research went into figuring out, is what is that specific amount that we can have without triggering those nutrient sensing pathways. So it's
do you want to talk a little bit about the original research that Dr. Longo did with this in his research? Because I remember that research in that book to be remarkable, because he took a not insignificant group of people who were not healthy, particularly. They were metabolically not healthy. They were overweight. They had high blood pressure. They were insulin resistant. And he had them, and if memory serves, he had them do a fast mimicking diet once a month for, was it 3 months in a row?
Yeah.
3 consecutive months.
Yep.
And the results were remarkable. Do you want to maybe talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's really interesting. And then let's talk a little bit about different ways to use an FMD. Like for some people, it might be twice a year. Some people, maybe every quarter is a good idea. Some people in certain stages, if you've got more work to do, might it be a good idea to do 3 months in a row?
Absolutely. We generally recommend that everybody start with 3 consecutive trials to kick you off, and then transition into once every 3 to 4 months, even if you're healthy. So one of the original trials that Dr. Longo and team did was with healthy individuals. Actually, that's where they started things off. There's also quite a bit of research in oncology, but that's a whole story for another day. But even in the healthy individuals trial, with those 3 consecutive monthly rounds of fasting mimicking, that's just 5 days a month for 3 months in a row, they were able to show weight loss, but not just any weight loss. This was the weight loss with the muscle sparing. They also were able to show that there was visceral fat loss, that the most dangerous fat. They were able to show that it was especially targeted in the trunk region. So these are all the perfect type of fat for us to tap into, especially when we're protecting muscle. And that was able to be shown in that population as well. They also showed improvements in some of those metabolic markers. So again, even in healthy individuals. But in that healthy group, there were some that were a little bit veering off from a healthy baseline. And it was really interesting to see. They did a what's called a post hoc analysis of the groups, where they took the individuals that veered further away from healthy baseline on all of these metabolic markers. So, fasting glucose, HbA1c, CRP. So all of these markers that, are associated with inflammation or high blood sugar, et cetera. And the people that were veering further away from healthy baseline showed significant improvement. And the ones that were already healthy stayed already healthy. So they didn't go to unhealthy or very dangerously low levels. Right. So really incredible kind of hyper targeted approach depending on the individual, which is the magic of letting your body do the work. It knows where it needs to spend the energy. So metabolic health, we already mentioned weight loss. Let's talk about biological age. We're here for longevity, right? This is what this is all about. We were able to show in another study that those 3 cycles showed a 2.5 year biological age reversal. That is 15 total days over a period of 90 days that you're actually doing something. And your biological age went back 2.5 years. There's almost nothing that I know of that can do that.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I just want to point back to the fact when you said the healthy people just stayed healthy, I would argue that the healthy people saw different benefits under the hood that just weren't visible. Right? Like maybe a reduction maybe in inflammation, a reduction in senescent cell load, or this reversal in biological age, like whatever the case may be, you're going to make it, you're taking out the trash.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of that autophagy that gets triggered. We haven't really mentioned that, but that cellular cleanup is also known as autophagy, and it's triggered. And unfortunately, you do have to fast for at least 2 to 3 days in order to really activate that and maximize it. And so that's why we want to do these longer fasts. And so, we were talking about the differences between the fasts, like that autophagy, that deep cellular cleanup that you're bringing up, we really do need to do some of these longer fasts to activate that. But even if you're a healthy person, this is so critical. We need to give our body that cleanup, that autophagy, a few times a year to just essentially spring cleanup a few times a year.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's brilliant. Now, so let me fire a few quick fire questions at you, and maybe we'll end up in another place also. Yes. People will ask, and I'm sure you've seen these questions 1,000 times, but should they stop exercising when they're doing their effort? Let's say they're doing a Prolon fast. And I want to talk a little bit about what's in the box also, but
absolutely.
But maybe we should backpedal to that before I go to the questions. Let's talk about what's in the box, because like I'm going to take you back to when I first read that book, and I sat there and there were, I think in the book, there was a menu of sorts that Dr. Longo. And so I sat there, little nutrition girl, painstakingly building out a menu for myself and looking for pomegranate seeds and all these different ingredients that he mentions, thinking, and I'm sure it's true, like there were polyphenols he was after nutrient density with very little energy. Right. And so, but it was a nightmare. And the first time I did it, and I took a bunch of people through it with me, we had different meals every single day because little miss, well, we don't want to get bored with our food. Well, I got over that in a hurry, I can tell you. Because number one, you don't want to be cooking because it's miserable. You don't want to be in the kitchen. And number two, when you're trying to reinvent the wheel every single day, that's just a bad idea right out of the gate.
Well, it's a recipe for disaster, because even if you were to pick hypothetically the right foods per the recommendations, you could pick actually the wrong vegetable or the wrong fruit or the wrong XYZ thing, because it's more than just calories. If it was just calories,
it was protein. Oh my God. It was so detailed.
and not just protein, it's the specific amino acids, because there's certain amino acids that especially trigger some of these nutrient sensing pathways like mTOR and IGF-1, things like that you have to be so careful with. So it is a very, very delicate science as to what will and will not trigger those nutrient sensing pathways. And if you're going to go 5 days with, a restricted intake, I'm not giving that up to chance. I am not risking picking the wrong thing or putting possibly a little bit too much of something.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love Prolon, for just making it simple. You get a box, you get everything you need in the box. It tells you exactly what to do. The menu is there. You don't have to cook. All you have to do is reheat a couple of soups a day, and that's it. I mean, it couldn't get easier than that.
Yeah. So let's talk about what's in the box, because actually, no, let's talk about, you mentioned mTOR.
Yeah.
So, and this dovetails a little bit into one of the questions I was going to ask you, and that is supplements.
Yeah.
Right. Should people keep taking their supplements? And there's some supplements I'm guessing might be okay, but some might not be so okay. Like, for example, maybe branched chain amino acids or essential amino acids might be not the right idea, because they are going to push mTOR, which right now we're telling mTOR to take a break.
Exactly. This is 5 days where we just want it to chill. Same with IGF-1. Those are not necessarily, like, you don't want them to be low all of the time. You want a healthy balance. But during this 5 day, you want them to be completely not activated at all. That's the goal. We really want to keep them very limited in their activation. And so that is where we get really, really picky, is with mTOR, IGF-1, and also PK. Those are the three big ones that we're
okay. Yeah.
But now when you speak about supplements, so yes, the big no-nos are going to be anything that has calories, amino acids, proteins, sugars. I mean, those are absolute no's. We generally recommend that people discontinue any supplements during the 5 day period, just because there's just so many out there. We'd have to make the list would be, out the door and, going on and on and on and on. To say yes, no, yes, no. So it's just safer for us to say, no, just take off your supplements for these 5 days. Keep your medications, keep anything that's doctor recommended as kind of a must have, anything that you need to have to maintain. I have some people that tell me, like, I can't sleep if I don't take my melatonin or my magnesium.
Yeah.
That's a non-negotiable for me. And so, there's always going to be some exceptions, but the safest route, if you can exclude them, is to exclude them.
Right. Okay. But, with magnesiums of the world, ultimately it's going to be pretty inoffensive, or vitamin D3, for example, like your foundations. Yeah. I think you might even get into trouble maybe with fish oil if you take a lot of it, or phospholipids, because now you're adding fat to the equation. So think of it as a 5 day supplement holiday, if you will. And there's benefit to that. Sorry?
There are supplements in it too, in the box. So it does come with.
Oh, that's right. You've got your stuff. It's already accounted for.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, that's part of the magic, right? That's part of what Valter Longo was envisioning when he created the fasting mimicking diet, is let's make sure that we cover all of our micronutrient needs during this 5 day period. So there are some supplements that are also added just to make sure that we cover every single, dot all of our I's, cross all of our T's.
Yeah. And I think part of that also is some of these foundational supplements it's part of how the body functions. It's part of maybe supporting some of these detoxification pathways, or whatever the case may be. So it's ultimately going to help to get you to your goal. So I have another question. Okay. Question number 2 was exercise. Should people stop exercising? Can they keep exercising? I mean, you mentioned that growth hormone goes up anyway. So I find that I sleep very well when I'm doing actually any fast, including FMD, but exercise, should people exercise, or should they stop exercising, or does it depend on how you feel?
We should talk about sleep too, because there's so much info about sleep and fasting. But in terms of exercise, we recommend that for most people, you just keep it light. So you don't want to just sit on the couch all day. As you mentioned, your body is detoxifying during this period. It's great to help your body flush it out with movement. Movement is going to be awesome for that. And of course, hydration. Those are 2 key pieces that you want to make sure you're maintaining. But we don't want people training for a marathon either. So my rule of thumb is, if you're breaking a sweat, you've probably gone a little too far, at least for your, as you're getting used to fasting, and as you're getting used to fasting mimicking, just take it easy, but go for a walk, go for a stretch, go for your light yoga class, go for something along those lines to help your body flush and to stay, keep that movement, but not so much so that you're possibly going to have safety concerns, right? Because you're
Right.
still having low intake of food. And so we just want to be mindful of that.
Right. So, but for someone who's experienced in fasting, they might be able to keep up their workouts.
I know a lot of people who do, and they
Yeah.
swear by it, and they think that they're just, superhero style. And it makes sense because the other things, other counter-regulatory hormones that are increasing when we fast are things like adrenaline.
Mm-hmm.
And so that goes up. And so if you think about it, like back in the evolutionary days where
you have to go hunting then.
It's time to hunt. You're fasted, so you gotta be able to catch that lion or cheetah or antelope or whatever thing that's running incredibly fast. You got to be able to do that. So, and even if you're foraging for berries, you still need the energy to be able to do that. So it makes a lot of sense that people would feel especially able. But we just want everybody to be very, very careful, be mindful that is your body's response, but you don't have to, push it. You let your body kind of.
And it's basically what you're used to, right? So don't start the gym. Don't start going to the gym the same week you start your Prolon fast.
Yes.
But if you're already exercising, you might be able to figure it out as you go along. Okay, great. Now there's this compound that nobody's stopped talking about for the last 2 years. And so people are going to ask if I'm using GLP-1s. Right? If I'm using GLP-1s, should I? Is it a contraindication? Is there benefit to doing a Prolon fast? I mean, I know what my answer is, but I want to know what your answer is.
I have so many ways to answer this, and first I want to say there's a lot of reasons that somebody would take a GLP-1. Some people are taking it, just for some weight loss. Some people are taking it because they have type 2 diabetes. And so they're also, trying to get weight loss in that space specific for type 2 diabetes. If that is your case, if you are using GLP-1s and you have type 2 diabetes or even pre-diabetes, I would strongly recommend that you do the L-Nutra Health programs where you have physician oversight and you have dietitian oversight and you have additional support, because you're very likely on GLP-1s along with metformin and maybe something else, right? And it kind of complicates things. It can be a little bit more, we just want to be safer in that case. So the answer is you can absolutely be on GLP-1s and do fasting mimicking, but depending on the person, I would just want to make sure that they are overseen carefully. And then for other people where you're doing it maybe just for those last few pounds or things like that, then usually it's generally safe. We have not done any research with this, so I have to be very, very careful with what I say here, right? It's so new that there isn't research on fasting mimicking diets and GLP-1s. So I would say speak to your physician, let them know that you want to do the fasting mimicking diet, and then they will give you the yay or the nay. But there are physicians that are pairing them. So
well, I would think, to begin with, it's going to make it easier. You're not going to be as hungry. Your blood sugar will be steadier. I think the other interesting thing is that if you're using a GLP-1 properly, meaning that you're eating your protein forward, nutrient dense diet and you're exercising and all the things, that cellular cleanup that you get from an FMD might be an added benefit. But
right. And we know that
to your point, we don't have the research. So I think it's just,
we're always going to err on the side of caution when we don't have the research, because we have so much research. We can say so much that when there's the odd time where we can't, I just always like to give my little, alert that that research doesn't exist yet. So I anticipate that it's around the corner. Just because in today's world where GLP-1s are so prevalent, I mean, people are asking these questions understandably. And I also like to note that with GLP-1s, as you mentioned, the right way to do it is to make sure that you're having an adequate amount of protein, but it's more than just the protein. It's also about weight bearing exercise. So it's both of those things together. And, and unfortunately, oftentimes when people are on GLP-1s, they also might have nausea. Maybe they don't want to get out and exercise and go into all those things, that you might feel more tired, and everybody's different, right? But when we have the fasting mimicking diet, can actually be an alternative, maybe start there before GLP-1s and see what you can achieve with that. You'd be pretty impressed to see what you can achieve there. And then alternatively, what we've seen some physicians do is actually have the dose of the GLP-1s paired with a fasting mimicking diet, because fasting mimicking diet is actually muscle protective. Unfortunately, GLP-1s, as you know, are going to be leaching into that muscle pretty heavily. So it can be a nice way to just decrease that dose too.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, like you said, without the exercise, without the protein for it, like the GLP-1s, the problem with it is it looks and smells like a silver bullet, and it's anything but.
Yeah.
And actually, you have to work a little harder to make it work properly for you.
You really do. You really do.
Okay, let's get back to our star of the show here. What about coffees and teas? Can people have those when they're doing a Prolon fast? And I think there's teas in the box.
They're all herbal, non-caffeinated teas. We have hibiscus, we have lemon and mint. So
I
those
love
are
hibiscus. Actually, it's my favorite.
It is so good. I get extra packets of the teas, and I just make them when I'm not fasting as well, because they're so good. But those are the teas that are already included. Now, a lot of people love their teas or they love their coffee, and so they want to add that in. Now, our recommendation is to, if you can, exclude any caffeinated beverages during this period of time. There's a couple of reasons that is recommended. One being that there is some early research that you can actually trigger some nutrient sensing pathways with a very high amount of caffeine.
Oh, interesting.
So so it's the research is still relatively limited, but just because we're always going to take the route that we know is the safest, excluding caffeine is going to be your safest option. Now, we do suggest that you can have up to 140 milligrams of caffeine a day. If that coffee is that's what you need to start your day. You're not letting go of that. And there's a lot of people that feel that way. And so that's the option for those that do need that cup of coffee. And 140 milligrams, everybody's coffee is different. So look at your coffee individually, but that for a lot of people is like 2 cups of coffee a day.
Yeah. You're just going to have to leave out the sweet cream double latte kind of vanilla cinnamon festive mix.
Yes. And even if it's I had so many people but what if it has stevia, or what if it's 0 calorie or XYZ thing? No, just take your coffee black and take your tea as is, at least for these 5 days.
Yeah, just for 5 days. And I actually think it's an interesting opportunity to recalibrate your taste buds a little bit. So let's talk about what's in the box.
Yes.
What's in the box? Because the box has changed a lot over the last few years.
Well, and we continue to bring in new things. So by the time this airs, we will be moments away from a whole new varietal of our soups. I don't know how much I'm allowed to share yet, but just keep your eyes peeled. It's coming in early 2025. But right now we still have so you are getting everything you need in days boxes. There's 5 days boxes individually packaged so that you know exactly what you can have for that day. And then you open up that box and it has your breakfast, lunch, snacks, supplements, teas. So it has everything that you need. What are you having for breakfast is a nut-based bar. Then you transition to some of the snacks like the kale chips, the olives, and for any olive haters out there, try these olives and I
love the olives.
They are, I didn't like olives. I used to pick them off of anything. I wouldn't even consider anything that got near an olive. And now I am hooked. These are a totally different olive. They're flown in from Italy with Italian herbs. They are, everything that is done by El Nutra and Prolon is highest quality, going out of the way to make sure that it's the best of the best. And these olives, that certainly is one of those tests that I can say is really incredible. So we also have the soups. So generally we have soups for lunch and for dinner. These are going to they're incredible flavors like pea, chickpea, leek, tomato, butternut. There's so many different ones that are now available, and you can choose your flavors. So there are right now 2 major varietals we have that you can choose from depending on what your preference is. But
nice.
As I mentioned, there may be more coming.
Excellent. And you have the drink.
And then there's also the L drink.
Glycerol drink.
Yeah. I strongly recommend making your hibiscus tea. You usually get 1 or 2 of those a day. So you can make one of your hibiscus teas and then put the hibiscus tea, water, and then the glycerol in a big water bottle and then just sip that throughout the day.
Nice.
It is delicious.
Nice. Good hack. I like that hack.
It's a great hack. It also, because the glycerol gives you a little bit of energy, it can help with hunger. It can help with energy. And so, of course, the purpose is primarily for that muscle support, but you can also get a lot of additional benefits.
Right. And so, but you can drink other herbal teas.
Yes. So right. we recommend generally stick to the box. I mean, that's kind of our rule of thumb, stick to the box. But we have a few exceptions, and unlimited herbal teas is an allowable addition. We do recommend that it is single ingredient only. So there's a lot of those herbal teas that are like mixing a ton of different things in there. If you can keep it single ingredient, that's safer.
It's safer. All right. Smarter, safer. Okay. What else? Oh, so who shouldn't do a prolonged fast? Because there are certain populations of people probably that maybe this isn't the right time for them, but.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So for individuals with type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, or metabolic conditions, we recommend that they do L-Nutra Health. So that's important. So it is because Prolon is incredible, especially for healthy individuals, people who are looking to maximize longevity, et cetera, lose a little bit of weight. That is a great tool because you get the box and you're off to the races. But for individuals that need that additional support, make sure that you get it. Other individuals that should be mindful of this are going to be individuals under the age of 18. That is a growth phase. And so we don't want to limit growth, which we do want usually when we're doing a fast. But for individuals under 18, we don't recommend it. Same thing for individuals who are pregnant or breastfeeding. That's also a growth phase. So not good fast. And then we also just want to be mindful for individuals over 65. That population, there's just additional risks. So it's not necessarily that they cannot, but that they should definitely be checking in with their physician, making sure that they are healthy, making sure that there's no muscle wasting or sarcopenia, et cetera. We want to focus on that first before we fast. So those are probably the biggest groups. Anybody that has like a late stage or end stage health condition, absolutely probably not the right time to be fasting. But again, anybody with a condition should always be checking with their physician.
So you mentioned oncology earlier. So people with cancer. But again, that's going to be on a case by case basis. I would think you have to work with your physician or your team.
Yes, work with your oncologist, but there are now about a dozen or so studies, maybe more now actually, specific to oncology. This is actually where the fasting mimicking diet was originally designed for. So Dr. Valter Longo was looking and seeing that, fasting was incredibly powerful in patients with cancer, but that there was a lot of hesitation in using fasting in that population. And so creating the fasting mimicking diet was the solution. So there's some pretty incredible research that is being done there, but you should be, working with your oncologist. But there's a lot of research available online. I'd go to lnutrahealth.com. Even I think it's also on our Prolon site as well. You can click science and you can go into the articles and it'll kind of go over all of that research there that you can share with your physician.
Well, there's some interesting literature around chemotherapy and fasting, right? That there was a study that showed that people who fasted for 24 hours before their chemo treatment, the treatment was actually more harmful to the cancer, but the healthy cells were more protected from the treatment. And then they could just refeed on the other side. Just for the love of God, don't have a can of Boost. Have some bone broth or something. But
So yeah, it's really interesting, the research there. And I always like to specify, every cancer is different. So
of course,
super important. But there's real brand new research on triple negative breast cancer showing that not only was chemotherapy easier, less symptoms during chemotherapy, et cetera, which is what a lot of the earlier research was showing pretty consistently, but also improved survival rates in that population. So that's a new study that just came out as well. So really, really exciting early research kind of coming out there, and why a lot of oncologists are very excited about fasting mimicking.
Yeah, 100%. So I want to go back a little bit very briefly because we're coming up on time here, but you mentioned if people are under 18, they shouldn't really be looking at the FMD or Prolon. But in a world where we have such an increasing number of kids that are, they're coming to metabolic imbalance early in their lives. Is
Yeah,
there a case where supervised with a physician and a counselor, like approached properly, could Prolon be helpful for those kids? Because it
absolutely.
certainly might help them to move the needle, but again, like we have to make sure, even from a psychological perspective, that it's being approached properly.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why I think there's always going to be cases where there's an edge case where it makes sense
Mm-hmm.
to recommend the FMD. In those cases, again, I'd probably recommend the L Nutra Health programs where you have the additional supervision and you have the additional support, especially if there's metabolic health concerns
Dysfunction. Yeah.
that are prevalent. So I think that would probably be my recommendation in that case.
Okay, cool.
But there is
So
some early research too that's happening right now in type 1
is there
diabetes in pediatrics.
really?
And so there was a study that came out several years ago now that was with mice models of type 1 diabetes, and there was actually regeneration of the beta cells. So those are the cells that are actually producing
Wow.
it's
Insulin.
everything that is missing, unfortunately, in patients with type 1 diabetes. So we really got excited by that, started doing a lot more research, and now there is going to be some trials coming out very hopefully soon, showing some of that as well, and hopefully in patients that may not have other options.
That is fantastic. That's fabulous. It's great news. I mean, there's many things I love about this, but one of the things that is so incredible about Prolon as a company is the amount of research that you guys are doing continually in
Yeah,
this area, which is really, there's not a whole lot of we think, we believe, somebody said, it looks like, it's, this study shows and this
yeah,
study shows and what we've seen clinically. And that is really, it's refreshing and it's empowering, I think,
yeah.
right? Because I think
There's
that people can really feel that this is, and as you said earlier, there's nothing faddish about this. There's nothing trendy. Like this is a really powerful tool in your toolkit that you can pull out as needed to get the results that you're looking for in so many different areas.
absolutely, it is such a great tool, and I think the reason why I like it the most is that it's only asking about 15 to 20 days a year from you, right? I mean,
Mhm.
of course, we want people to be making healthy choices outside of that and making healthy choices every day, and maybe intermittent fasting in between, and doing some other healthy choices. But if all we're really asking is 15 to 20 days, I feel like that is pretty darn easy to swallow.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, I love how you throw those in. Um, Renee's got another secret side hustle and stand up over there.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so Renee, we've got some exciting stuff coming down the pipes. Where I'm going to be leading a group Prolon fast, which is going to be open to everybody, right?
Absolutely. We got to
So
practice what we preach, right?
that's right. I can't wait. Honestly, I actually might end up doing one beforehand. So I'm going to have to get myself another kit for the actual fast because I feel like I'm due right now. I'm just like, I could really use 5 days of less of everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, like we said, I mean, once a month for 3 months is a good way to kick things off. And then, do them quarterly after that. So there's
Yeah.
plenty of opportunities to sneak these in.
I'm all in. So, but you guys, if you want to join me, so we're going to my group fast, and we're going to be talking about this on social media. So, if you're following me on Instagram, I'll be posting about it. And all you have to do, you can get your kits at prolonlife.com/nat, and you'll get a discount for using that. And we'll get to do this together. And you can also access the resources of Prolon, right? During the fast, if you need any kind of support. Renee, you want to talk about that a little bit?
For sure. So the beauty of doing this all together and that Nat will be leading this is that we get to have the community. And so as easy as Prolon will make fasting, having people to do it with makes it
So
even
much better.
easier and so much better. And it's just
Yeah.
like, I mean, so this is a really, really great opportunity to get not just the community, but also all your questions answered right away. So we'll be in a group chat, probably WhatsApp, I think is where we'll be. As soon as you purchase your kit, you'll get notified via email of the ability to join that chat. You can hop in and we'll get kicked off on March 2nd and just answer questions, share information. I'll be in there as well, sending in some interesting articles that I think you guys might like as well. And of course, making sure that you guys have everything that you need to succeed across the 7 days, because we like to jump in the day before and stick around for celebration day too.
Amazing. And so, if you're doing, we're going to kick it off in March. My plan is to do March, April, May, so that I'm moving into summer. And I feel like March is almost moving into spring here. And there's beauty to the seasonality of doing this kind of work.
Absolutely.
Internally in your body with a change of season. So, we'll start off with a small bite. I'm inviting you all to join me on March 2nd. And then we'll see where we go from there. How's
Absolutely. That? Absolutely. And there's no bad time to fast. So go, if you want to get started as soon as you hear about
all this. Do one in February, prime the pump.
Meet us back again in March.
Yeah.
Start now and then we'll see you again in March.
Yeah, you never know. Watch my Instagram. I might be doing an informal one in February. So, okay, great. Well, Renee, this has been a great conversation. Is there anything that we left off? Is there any parting words you have for the audience? Any one final little golden nugget that you want to leave people with?
Oh my gosh.
On their longevity journey as we kick off 2025, which is going to be a really interesting year.
There's so much. I wish we could talk for days and days and days, because I probably could. But I think for me, especially with January and, all the resolutions and everything that's going on, is find something that you feel like, again, you can get the biggest bang for your buck. There's so many things that can take up a lot of your time and, may not give you the results that you're looking for. So whatever it is that you choose, find something that like really gets you motivated, because what I have seen time and time again is if you can do one thing that you start seeing some results with, it is so motivating in propelling you to do more and more and more. And I'm sure a lot of people listening have already experienced that and have already seen that. And so for me, fasting mimicking is that, incredible propellant that will just get you off to the races, because you are tapping at a cellular level and it impacts so much. But even if it's not that, find your piece that's really just going to get you that motivation that you need to keep making more changes throughout the rest of the year.
I love it. I love it. One thing, pick one thing, even if it's stop eating 3 hours before bed, and lean into that. Yeah. And see what happens. Renee, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I really appreciate it. We all do. And maybe one last time, give people the website and where to find you and all that kind of stuff on social media.
Absolutely. So to join our group fast and to purchase Prolon at a very nice discount, I think it's 20 to 25% off, which is the best that you'll find anywhere. You can go to prolonlife.com/Nat, and you can find a lot of information and science there as well. So definitely go take a peek. And then if you want to learn more on Instagram, we are at Prolon, or you can find me on Instagram at Fitton Nutrition. That's Fitton Nutrition. So
beautiful.
see you all there.
Thank you so much, Renee.